Uganda Securities Exchange over the past 3 months. For Airtel Uganda, it has just traded over about 94,844 shares, valued at 8.85 million so far within the period that we are talking about. Now, for Airtel, of course, we cannot talk about 3 months because it hasn't even made 3 months yet. We can only talk about the last 4 weeks. And in these 4 weeks, this is the data we have collected. At least 94,800 shares and 8.85 million shillings turnover have been recorded on the market. On average, every trading session has about 4,516 traded shares within the period. And the volume high, the highest volume so far that has been traded is 17,075 shares, which was achieved on the 9th of January for the same period. Well, for the competitors like MTN Uganda, Airtel still has a lot more. We still expect a lot more from it. However, for MTN Uganda, of course, we are looking at a very much bigger market capitalization and a higher pricing. So you might have a few changes here and there. We might not put them necessarily at the same scale to weigh in on what could be the potentially better investment. However, MTN has also been resilient for the past 2 years since listing in 2021. The company has been issuing dividends quarterly. You can imagine 5 times it has issued dividends and they have been increasing. The company has also improved its performance, generally speaking, in terms of service delivery and the sector itself, the telecommunications sector as well. Those are the top gainers. Looking at the bottom losers, however, East African Breweries Limited came out with a loss of 0.51%, down to 2,750.67 shillings. KCB Group as well lost about 0.12%, down to 507.82 Ugandan shillings. In terms of activity or trading volumes, the biggest trader was Stanbic. Stanbic Bank had about 17,000 shares traded at a closing price of 32 Ugandan shillings and still an opening price of 32 Ugandan shillings. So there was no change in price for this particular stock. And then MTN Uganda was the other trader with just about 5,800 shares that were traded. And these closed the day with a price of 170.0 Ugandan shillings. Now, looking at the all-share index and the other indices on the Uganda Securities Exchange, which are market performance indicators, the benchmark index, the USE all-share index, inched upwards up to 0.07 points, up to at least 871.21 points. This was due to the majorly the gain in the prices for the cross-listed stocks, like I mentioned earlier, with Kenya Airways, Equity Bank, and so on, coming in as top gainers, representing now a 1-week loss, however, of 1.06%, and a 4-week loss of at least about 0.21%, and an overall year-to-date loss of about 0.15%. The USE Local Company Index, or the LCI, increased by 0.03% to reach at least 269.85 points. Now, Local Company Index increased due to majorly the gain in price by Airtel Uganda alone, which was the only domestic listing that appeared amongst the top gainers. Now, currently, the Local Company Index is still counting year-to-date losses of about 0.74%. So, January hasn't yet really showed much fruits in terms of the appreciation in prices and activity on the domestic stocks as well. Now, on a similar note, when you look at Kenyan markets, there has been a flock of different fund managers and investors to the dollar-denominated investments. Kenyans have flocked the US dollar-based investments in a move to actually cushion against the effects of the weakening Kenyan shillings. The drive towards dollar-denominated investment products by both the domestic and diaspora investors has also seen fund managers set up forex investment vehicles in response to the demand from clients. Last year, for instance, the Capital Markets Authority of Kenya granted approvals to multiple fund managers to set up dollar-denominated money market funds. That was last year. And fixed income funds at the shillings saw its sharpest depreciation against the dollar in 3 decades. Between April and June last year, the CMA gave approvals as well for the registration of Old Mutual Dollar Money Market Fund. And this was followed by the registration of the ICEA US Dollar Fixed Income Fund, as well as Sanlam US Dollar Fixed Income Fund in the 3rd quarter of 2023, and the registration of Etika US Dollar Money Market Fund as well as Etika US Dollar Sharia Fund and Etika US Dollar Wealth Fund. A couple of funds have actually been registered under the dollar-denominated investments. According to CMA 3rd quarter statistics as well, own collective investment schemes, assets under management that are in dollar-denominated funds stood at 12.3 billion Kenyan shillings, approximately $75 million US dollars. Comparing this with the previous year, 2022, there has been a shift from 5.1 billion to 12.3 billion Kenyan shillings of assets under management. The main reason, according to CMA, for the interest in dollar investments is that the Kenyan shilling has been depreciating for quite some time now, and there's demand from investors who want to hedge against the currency depreciation. Yields on Kenyan euro bonds have also rallied, presenting the opportunity for fund managers to package dollar-based products. According to Kenneth Maina, who is the co-founder of Etika Capital Fund as well there. Yields refer to interest rates of returns. Now, when you talk about a yield, it's sort of an interest rate or a return that is based on the prevailing bond prices. For example, if bond prices currently are maybe standing at 18% or 15%, let's say, you're going to have a yield of tending towards 15%. And that is going to be sort of like the rate of return or the interest rate of returns that is going to be based on the bond prices. The dollar-based investments have delivered returns on 2 fronts. Number one, being gains made from the depreciation of the local unit when investors actually change their foreign notes for Kenyan shillings. Whenever there is a change of currency from the US dollar to the Kenyan shillings, you're going to have the Kenyan shillings on demand. Whenever there is the vice versa, you're going to have still a vice versa effect. You're going to have the dollar on demand. And this is what has been happening. The dollar has been on demand in Kenya, and the Kenyan shillings has dropped in demand. And that means the value or the currency strength has been going down, consequent of this. Yields on Kenyan euro bonds have meanwhile been elevated, driven primarily by investor jitters around Kenya's inability to settle its debut of 2014 Eurobond this June, with the higher yields presenting short-term opportunities to both investors and fund managers as well. In a related story, we'll be telling you more about the Ugandan side. Ugandan currency has been a little bit more resilient, and this is quite surprising. But yes, the currency has been more resilient, probably following the management policies by Bank of Uganda, the very strict rate hike that really kept inflation low, especially during last year's high inflation periods where we had inflation going up to 10%. And so that probably could be one of the reasons the Ugandan currency has kept within the strength that is required. But however, still similar challenges could be presented if further depreciation happens as well for the Ugandan shillings. Moving away from that, in Kenya, going into Kenya, Nairobi Securities Exchange saw over at least 42 companies trade last week on Friday, and the day ended with 16 gainers and 16 losers on the market. A well-balanced day. However, the benchmark index declined still, nevertheless, by 1.60 points. Now, the biggest gainer was ever ready East Africa, with a gain of at least 5.71%. Price appreciation closing at 1.11 Kenyan shillings per share, followed by Britam Holdings with a 4.08% appreciation, and Samia Africa with a 1.93% appreciation, and the Nation Media Group with at least 1% appreciation in price. On the other hand, the losing side had East African Breweries Limited. Similar story with Uganda. You can see how they are related. East African Breweries lost in Uganda, and it's losing here as well, which makes a lot of sense. And East African Breweries Limited ended with a depreciation of 11.6%, down to 104.5 Kenyan shillings. But talking about breweries, there's been news concerning the high cost of raw material in the brewers industry, which is biting on their profits. That is something you can also look out for if you're an investor, especially in the brewery industry. The cost of production has been going up, which has impacted highly on their profits. Breweries are one of the most profitable organizations, and anything that concerns cost of production does impact how their profits are actually coming out. Trans-Century East Africa also had a loss of 4.08%, and then Safaricom recorded the highest volume with at least 928,000 shares traded per trading session. Absa Bank had at least 460,000 shares, and Stanbic Holdings at least 400,100 shares, and I&M Holdings at least 336,300 shares that were traded on the market. Regarding the performance of the indices, we have a couple of indices that indicate performance on average in the Nairobi Securities Exchange, the benchmark being the All-Share Index. And as I said earlier, it declined by 1%, about 1.6%, down to 90.37 points, representing currently a one-week loss of 3.21% and a four-week loss of about 1.43%. The other hand has at least NSE 10 losing 2.22%, the NSE 20 as well losing at least 0.58%, and the NSE 25 losing 1.73%. Not a very good week for the Nairobi Securities Exchange all-share indices. But that's it, ladies and gentlemen, from East Africa. Just moving across the board before we wind up, looking at a week ahead for the US markets. What should we be expecting? Now, last week stocks closed out another week hovering near record highs as one of the busiest weeks of the quarter is set to greet investors. Earnings from 5 of the magnificent 7 tech stocks, that is Apple, Alphabet, Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, will highlight a packed week of quarterly reports. In all, 106 S&P 500 companies, including 6 Dow components, are slated to report in the week ahead per the fact set. On Wednesday afternoon, the Federal Reserve is set also to announce its latest policy decision. Investors expect the central bank will leave the interest rates unchanged in a range of 5.25% to 5.50%. Investors will also be closely watching for any commentary during Federal Chairman Jerome Powell's conference on Wednesday about when Federal Reserve may begin cutting interest rates. On Friday, the January jobs report is set to also be released, where economists expect a modest tick down in job additions, while the unemployment rate is projected to remain flat at least 3.7%. Elsewhere on the schedule, we have key updates on activity in the manufacturing and services sectors of the economy, as well as the latest data on job openings, highlights of economic side of things as well. Outside of big techs, results from AMD, Starbucks, Pfizer, ExxonMobil and Boeing headline the reporting calendar as well. Stocks will enter the final week of the month near all-time highs. After a rocky start of the year, both the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq are up over 2% so far in January. Meanwhile, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is up by more than 1%. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. A lot is happening in the market, and we hope you will definitely keep your eyes on Smart24 TV for your latest information on business and financial markets. Remember, my name is Anthony. Follow us on X or Twitter, former Twitter, at Smart24 TV now, and on YouTube at Smart24 TV Live for more of your latest business content. See you around next time. Have a good day. Bye for now.
Smart24, driving business.
Cooking oil like no other makes your meal so sweet and scrumptious. The taste of Uganda, yeah, the taste of Uganda, the taste of Uganda, yeah, I want ya.
Fred!
Osmosis.
Freddy! Fred Dollar, my boss, CEO Inojo, the general of generals, the conqueror of conquerors, the first and the final, the sky above the skies, the promised land, the terms and the conditions, the international king crocodile, the source of the
Osmosis.
Nile.
I don't have money today.
Just take a polite loan of 200k to stock my shop. The signs and symptoms of success. The bank commander, not the bank teller.
Why hassle for a loan when you've got MTN Momo? We're sorting. Use the Momo app or dial *165*5# for all quick loans. Choose from the different loan options from our partners and get one that works for you. Together, we're unstoppable.
Smart24, driving business.